안녕하세요. So honored to be part of this gathering. We are Korean descendant living in US, Northern America, total island, Huchin, Ohlone land, Oakland, California. We offer these songs, 남누리 북누리 and drumming piece 울림, for the unification for our ancestral motherland Korea and for the peace in the world.
남누리 복누리 갈라진 우리 누리 그 누구가 찾을 건가 그 누가 찾을 건가 남누리 복누리 빼앗긴 우리 누리 우리뿐일세 우리뿐일세 이 땅을 딛고서 우리뿐일세 함께 가세 함께 가세 햇방에 큰 춤추며 남누리 복누리 하나 되는 그날까지 함께 가세 함께 가세 통일의 큰 춤 추며 남누리 복누리 통일되는 그날까지
Wow. Thank you to Do-hee Lee and the Mu Ritual performers for such a stirring and hypnotic performance. And it really does set the stage perfectly for today's event. Do-hee Lee, by the way, is an award-winning traditional and contemporary arts performer. She's trained in dance, drumming, singing, and shamanic music. She explores cultural memory, trauma, war, and human transformation. And her gifts, as I said, set the stage really well. So welcome to all of you. Good evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are tuning in. I understand that our audience for this event is coming in from time zones all around the world. My name is Vivian Lee, and I will be your host for this very special gathering to celebrate the 7th anniversary of Women Cross DMZ, a historic walk by some extraordinary women who need our help to continue their work. It is my deep pleasure to guide tonight this program. Women Cross DMZ is an extraordinary group of women working for years now to bring an end to the so-called forgotten Korean War, which is anything but for the people who live on the Korean Peninsula. This war is now more than 70 years old. We are also celebrating today Deanne Borsche-Liam's film, Crossings. Deanne's film beautifully captures the planning, the determination, and the execution of a symbolic walk to raise awareness about the urgent need to end this war by lifting up the voices of the people still living with the threat of tensions resurfacing. It's also a very stirring look at North Korean life as the North wants to present it. And it pulls back the curtain a bit. I won't tell you any more than that, because for those of you who haven't seen the film, you are in for quite a story that's going to be told. I've been to the DMZ. I was able to take a tour that most Koreans, Northern or Southern, can't. I remember being told not to point when I got to Panmunjom, the name of the location where the armistice was signed, because it might be mistaken for a weapon. I remember being advised to wear comfortable shoes with no straps that would make it good for running in case we had to dash for safety. I remember the tour being given in 3 languages, Japanese, English, and Korean in that order. Me, my family, and I, we were the only Koreans at that time on the tour bus. I remember driving through miles of countryside and farmland where families were living in basically a tripwire zone. I remember standing outside the official building at Panmunjom and looking at North Korean officials who were watching me through binoculars. But most of all, I remember looking down at the ground at a small concrete patch that was no bigger than a sidewalk square, which represented the demilitarized zone, that border, which I remember thinking was a very flimsy idea at the time because I was looking at it and I realized and kind of marveled at how much blood, sweat, tears, and treasure went into maintaining not only this idea of a boundary, but the need to keep it there in the name of an armistice. So tonight's event is a benefit for Women Cross DMZ and the Impact campaign that is coming on the heels of the finishing of Crossings, the film. This is an effort to show the film around the world to as many people as possible. The women you will hear from tonight want to remind the world with this film that the war never ended, and we, Americans, can play a significant role in helping to resolve the conflict. Special thanks goes to our honorary host committee for tonight, Abigail Disney, Ayoung Choi, Ann Delaney, Cinda Collins-Arsenault, Gay Dillingham, and Ed Crowlin. Our goal is to raise $100,000 for the Impact campaign. And so far, thanks to a handful of generous donors, we have raised $76,000 already. And just in the first few minutes of this event coming online, we raised hundreds of dollars, nearly 800. So keep it coming. We want you to hit that donate button that's at the bottom of your screen as many times as you feel like you have to in order to support the Impact campaign. And now for our very first guest, who really needs no introduction. For generations of women and around the world, she is synonymous with feminism, civil rights, peace building, and activism on gender equality. Everyone, please welcome Gloria Steinem.
Hello, dear friends. I welcome you to what may be one of the most important films you have ever seen. I know that it is crucial in my life because it addresses the Korean War, the world's longest war, and the possibility of ending it. It began when I was in high school. Young men in my high school class were drafted into this war. It was supposed to last only a brief time, and yet it has never, ever technically really been ended. And so the two great halves of the peninsula, North and South Korea, remain divided. I hope that this film will encourage you to make this a personal issue in your life. I went with a group of women to walk across the DMZ between North and South Korea to try to symbolize the fact that there is a walkable human space between these two countries that should not be divided and that has also divided families over time. This is the longest war. This is a war that the US Congress, my Congress, could end, and that I hope this film will be part of the initiative, the courage, the love of that ending. One of the great tragedies, of course, is meeting people whose families were and remain divided by this notion that there are two countries where there should only be one. So I hope that you will have every energy and motive and joy in helping to end this longest of all possible wars. I count it as one of the most important events of my life that I was able to make the journey across the so-called demilitarized zone and see a possible unity. And I know that you will count it as among the most honorable and celebratory events in your life if you help and lobby and convince your friends and your representatives of the importance of finally ending this longest war.
Thank you, Gloria. What Gloria said actually reminds me of how, as a child, in my family, the older generation found it very difficult to talk about the war. And so the younger generation, my cousins and I, we didn't have a very full understanding of the trauma that they still lived with. And Deanne's film actually gives you a very, an unwavering look at what is lived by millions of people on the peninsula. I just want to point out that I mentioned 76,000 had been raised already. We are now at close to 79,100, maybe a few $100s more, so keep it coming. Thousands of dollars have been raised in just the first few minutes, and we are so grateful. Our next guest is a poet and translator. Don Mi Choi is described as a person who can put into words the grappling with, the coming to terms with, of the effects of military violence and the US's imperial legacy on the Korean Peninsula. She is the author of DMZ Colony, Hardly War, and The Morning News is Exciting. She is also a 2021 MacArthur Fellow. Everyone, please welcome Don Mi Choi.
Thank you, Vivian. I'm very honored and grateful to be here to support the important work of Women Cross DMZ. And congratulations to brilliant Deanne Boucher Lim for the powerful and moving film Crossings. I have been translating contemporary Korean feminist poetry for the past 20 years. And one of the most important things I have learned is that women's voices and experiences have been kept on the margins of Korean society and history. The prominent feminist poet Kim Hae-soon has said, It may be that women's song is only sung in vowels without the consonants. I believe Women Cross DMZ and all other peace activists and artists involved are singing women's songs only in vowels, in the language of women and peace, without the language of division and war. In my book, DMZ Colony, I explored how Korea's division has justified violence and dehumanization of one another, of people who look the same and speak the same tongue. The DMZ, as a symbol of endless division and war, continues to perpetuate dehumanization. But the tireless, vital work of Women Cross DMZ and the film Crossings both resist and retranslate the DMZ as a symbol of peace. Such groundbreaking feminist retranslation and documentation of women's vision and action against war enable us to reimagine what the DMZ can be. The DMZ can be a place of peaceful crossings rather than painful separation, a place where peaceful lives and language can flourish. For me, the DMZ is a place of return, a return to a place that belongs to the Koreas and all of us who long for togetherness and peace. I will end with reading just a few short lines from my book. Return, black-faced spoonbill, return, return, red-crowned crane, return, return, white-naped crane, return, 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 return. Thank you.
Thank you, Don-Mi. Our next guest is Anne Delaney. She's an artist and an influential feminist philanthropist. She has served on the boards of the New York Women's and Ms. Foundations and helped to seed the birth and growth of Women Cross DMZ. And we're going to hear from her now why she believed in WCDMZ, as it's affectionately called among us who know these women, and why she supported them from the very beginning, as well as the film Crossings. Anne?
Good evening. I'm happy to join you all tonight. It's a joy to hear from Gloria, and I loved your words, Don-Mi Choi. That was beautiful to hear from you. I also want to thank Christine and Ayong. It was through them that I first heard of the plan to assemble a group of women to walk across the DMZ. And I was actually a little scared for them. It was one of the most militarized zones on Earth. I think it still is. But they were determined. To me, it seemed that they were literally taking the first steps towards peace. The solidarity between the women from both the North and the South threatened the status quo. Talk about a transformational moment. And it wasn't just a symbolic gesture. With their beautiful scarves and banners, amazing as that was, they all walked together, arm in arm, without suspicion or fear. It was historical, groundbreaking, and exactly what women can do when they trust what they know and trust each other. I'm so amazed by all the women who made that trip and equally inspired by Christine and her team for transforming that pivotal moment into a peace movement. Under Christine's leadership, the organization has been at every convening and conference and pushed for open dialogue and demanded that women are at the negotiation table. Peace has to be an option. If I did not support this movement, I would be abandoning my own sense of hope and my eternal belief that women can change the world. The activist from Liberia, Lema Bowie, who you will see in the film, led her own peace movement, said that she was successful because her country was that hungry for peace and that hungry for the story to be told when women take control of their lives. This is the 7th anniversary of Women Cross DMZ. Let's be hungry for peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. We're now going to hear from Deanne Bourget-Liam, the director of Crossings and an Emmy Award-winning documentarian. And what you heard from Anne and from Don Me was a central theme of her film, which was the absence of women in the effort to try and bring this war to an end. In the negotiations that we hear about that hit headlines every once in a while, almost like clockwork. Talks are on, talks are off, on, off again. And what her film does is it shows the immense effort that takes place when you're unified. And you've been hearing a lot about the film. We're now going to see clips of it. And I'm sure you will agree with me when I say that this story of women crossing the DMZ couldn't have been placed in better hands. So without further ado, Deanne Bourget-Liam, would you please join us?
Thank you so much, Vivian. And thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm just very moved after hearing everybody speak. I would like to begin basically by sharing a bit of context of how and why Crossings was made. I was born in Korea and adopted at the age of 8 by an American family, and was told at the time that I was an orphan. It wasn't until years later that images of a Korean family started to appear in my dreams. Eventually, I learned that they were not dreams, but memories of my birth family, a family devastated by the Korean War and led by a widowed mother with 5 children. Thus began my years-long journey to reunite with my birth family. Along the way, I came to understand that my separation from my Korean family through international adoption took place against a much larger backdrop of war and national division, and that my yearning to search for my birth family really mirrored those of hundreds of thousands of divided families throughout the Korean Peninsula who longed to see their loved ones again. That's why when Christine in 2015 asked me if I wanted to join on this incredible journey, I immediately agreed. As most of you know, the Korean War never ended. The fighting ended with an armistice, but no peace treaty was ever signed. The war is still being waged through policies of isolation, sanctions, war games, and threats of military strikes and nuclear proliferation. And while the Korean War is seared into the national consciousness of both North and South Korea, in the US, the war is referred to as the, quote, forgotten war. The film Crossings is an intervention in how we as an American public think about and narrate the Korean War. The film follows 30 remarkable women peacemakers who travel to North Korea and cross the demilitarized zone from the north to the south. Organized by Christine Ahn, the group includes Gloria Steinem, 2 Nobel laureates, and a very diverse cohort of women from throughout the world. Through their experiences, the film not only reminds audiences that the war is unended, but challenges audiences to acknowledge the US role in the war and in perpetuating the division of Korea. The delegation traveled to Korea in 2015 at a time of high tension between the US-South Korean alliance and North Korea. They were accused of being naive and apologists for the North Korean regime, accusations intended to silence and intimidate. But the women were undeterred. Here are 2 brief excerpts from the film that introduce some of the backstories of a few of the delegates and some of their initial thoughts as they arrive in Pyongyang.
I think we came here to be in solidarity with the women in South Korea and in North Korea. In the north of Ireland, we had bombings, shootings, killings. And in 1976, when my sister's 3 little children were all killed in a violent clash between British Army and an active service unit of the Irish Republican Army. It just was the spark for thousands and thousands of people, 90% women, coming out to march for peace to say, we can solve this without killing each other. and it made room for the political leaders to move forward towards a peace process.
We really feel an obligation as women to try to stop wars. When I was in high school during the Vietnam War, my sister got, as a present from her boyfriend in Vietnam, the ear of a Viet Cong. And it so shocked me that it really directed my whole life to be against war and against militarism.
Not everyone will applaud us. We are bound to face resistance. We are bound to...
My country, Liberia, was at war from 1989 till 2003. We started the women's movement and did the protest for 2.5 years. We were able to reach out to both the warring parties and the government, which contributed to the end of the Liberian War.
We will have to think on our feet and do exactly what our gut will be telling us to do. Yeah. Anything that comes easy is not worth fighting for. So.
We have 3 goals for this peace walk. One is replacing the armistice with a peace treaty.
If we could make a list and then divide it up, and also.
Second is to reunite families.
Whatever we send out, we can agree to verbally.
And the third is to lift up women's leadership.
So that also influences how we debrief.
At all levels of the peace building process.
As a Korean American who was partly educated in South Korea, I remember even as a first grader, we would create anti-communist posters. They would have speech contests denouncing communism and the need to defeat North Korea. South Koreans were educated that North Koreans were devils with, horns on their heads.
To be in a place that people are so reverent about their leader, I have a natural rebellion against authority. I've had it since I was a little kid. But we would never have been able to get into North Korea if we had said, North Korea is this horribly repressive regime. That's not how diplomacy works. You have to take countries where they are at and try to move them a little bit.
We're going to do this update. I feel kind of bad because the other bus doesn't really have the update. But basically last night, Pyongyang, Vanna...
Most people that travel to North Korea, they come here with preconceived notions. That the people have no independent free thinking. And that the entire population has been brainwashed. But I wanted the delegation to be able to just really experience the North Korean people as human beings.
You look beautiful.
Whenever I watch that scene, I'm reminded of the work of the award-winning author Viet Thanh Nguyen, who writes a lot about war and memory. He describes how we as Americans tend to view our side as being ethically superior and free of ideology, whereas we see the enemy, in this case the North Koreans, as automatons dictated only by ideology. From this perspective, we can see only the humanity of our own side and the inhumanity of the North Koreans. There's no room really for seeing the potential inhumanity of our side and the humanity of our so-called enemy. But during the journey, when the women of North Korea began to share their experiences of the war, this one-sided view, I thought, begins to shift. In the next excerpt, Lee Ok-hee talks about her experience as a 7-year-old during the war. She describes losing her hands when 2 US soldiers fire at her as she's trying to enter her home.
그때 놈들이 정말은 저희 작은 어른 손목을 사정없이 들어오 나갔습니다. 정신없이 다시 왼손을 들어서 문고리를 떠잡았는데 이놈들은 다시 저희 어른 손에도 왼쪽 손에도 또 총을 쐈습니다. 제가 정신 잃고 땅에 쓰러졌댔는데 이것은 정말 죽음보다도 더 무서운 것이었습니다. 저는 오늘 여성들이 모인 이 자리에서 정의의 양심 앞에 허소합니다. 가장 고통과 가슴 아플 것은 우리 어머니들과 아이들이라고 하게 저는 이 세상의 전쟁을 막고 감사합니다.
All I could think about was how real and alive it was for them, and how not real and alive that war is for Americans. I've made films about women in wartime, and I've heard that story and that story and that story in every country we've worked in. It confirms what I know, which is no matter where they are, no matter what the conflict, a woman's experience of war is the same.
오케이, 딱 저기 하고 연결해야 돼.
Thank you for watching those clips. The women, as you probably know, achieved their goal of crossing the DMZ and are met by several thousand cheering South Korean supporters. And that was exactly 7 years ago. Crossings documents the obstacles these women faced, the differences they navigated, and the solidarity and trust they forged during their journey. I think their story offers an inspiring model of bridge building and collective action, and I'm really excited to get the film out into the world. The film's impact campaign intends to harness the power of film and the power of this story to spark questions and create change. First, we want to build awareness. Most Americans don't know that the Korean War never ended, and that the governments of both North and South Korea and civic groups from both sides have been trying for decades to make peace, but that their progress is limited by ongoing hostilities between the US and North Korea. Our second goal is to change minds. We want to end the demonization and dehumanization of an entire country and its people that rationalizes sanctions and military action. And thirdly, we hope to shift US foreign policy away from war and toward diplomacy to end the Korean War and replace the armistice with a peace agreement. My hope is that Crossings will contribute in a meaningful way to bringing about peace between the United States and North Korea, bringing reconciliation between the North and South, and the reunification of families that remain divided for more than 70 years. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for your support.
Thank you, Deanne. I don't know about any of you out there who are tuning in, but if your eyes are not stinging and if your throat hasn't started to swell up, then you got to be made out of stone, because those clips actually, I knew they were coming up, but it's that last one. It's a tune. That song, Reunification, is a song that my mom used to sing when I was growing up, and she always sang it with joy. And it's really quite something to see North Korean moms and grandmothers and orphans singing that in the film. And Christine Ahn, who's coming up very shortly in this event to speak to us, is also singing that song. So it gives you a sense of how widely known it is. If you're in the Korean diaspora, you know that song. It's very likely that you know that song. Just to remind you, we are trying to raise money, and we've raised a really good amount of money. I dare say we're just a few $1,000s, maybe a little more than $15,000 away from our goal. So our goal was $100,000. At the start of this event, we had already raised $76,000, thanks to some very generous and quick acting and thinking donors. And as of a few minutes ago, when Deanne first started speaking, we had already gotten up to $83,800. So just several $1,000s shy of our ultimate goal of $100,000. So please keep giving. Please keep hitting that donation button. We're trying to show crossings 100 times, as I mentioned earlier in this event. We need to continue this pioneering work, and we need to get this screening happening in more than one location across the United States, as well as around the world. So while Women Cross DMZ has been fortunate to receive some very large foundation grants over the years, the core of its supporters is made up of individual donors, like all of you who are tuning in. So in the past several years, Women Cross DMZ has received more than 1,000 donations, and a lot of those donations came in the form of $25, $50, $100 checks. So whatever you can give would be most appreciated and will go a very long way. We are now going to hear from 3 individuals who are very excited to screen crossings. First is Mimi Han, who is the vice president of the World YWCA and a founding member of the Korean Women's Movement for Peace, a national coalition of South Korean grassroots women's voices who are advocating for peace, gender equality, and a world without war. After her, we will hear from Hani Hansen, the senior program officer at the Compton Foundation, a private family foundation in San Francisco. Hani helped to champion Compton's $5 million initiative to advance women's leadership in U.S. foreign policy and on issues of national security. And finally, we will hear from Becca Yang, a third-generation diasporic Korean and a recent graduate of Brown University, who is part of the campaign to lift the travel ban to North Korea. And she's also from Northeast Korea Peace Now, a grassroots network. So let's hear from them.
Warm greetings from South Korea. On behalf of the South Korean Women Movements for Peace, I'd like to congratulate for releasing this amazing film. And I also like to congratulate 7th anniversary already for Women Cross DMZ. Looking back 2015, it was just an unforgettable moment in my life. Walking and working along with these amazing women leaders and the peacemakers. However, when you say unforgettable memory, that doesn't mean always positive. I remember also so many ordeals and difficulties and challenges and even risks and dangers we had to go through. But despite all these, the crossing not only brought our awareness of this 70 years long unresolved Korean War, but also it bridged between the local to national to global level peace movement for women. And also it reminds us about 1991 when North Korea, South Korea, Japanese women crossed the DMZ for the first time in Korean history for the peace. And that legacy continued in 2015, and it didn't stop there. 2016, 17, 18, before the corona, more than 30 women organizations gathered together to walk, not across the DMZ, but along the DMZ for raising women's voice for the peace. Well, you can see that Women Cross DMZ was just not a one huge event or show. It really inspired and mobilized peace movement in Korea and all to the world. And I hope that this is a film that touches people's heart and moves people's heart to be a true peacemaker. And I wish that you all can be that part of that peace journey. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hani Hansen, and I work with the Compton Foundation. And in that role, I've had the absolute honor and privilege to get to support both Women Cross DMZ and the production of the Crossings film over the course of the last few years. The foundation also committed $30,000 to the Impact campaign for this film because we believe it's so important to get it out into the world. I think as I've gotten to know the work of Women Cross DMZ over the last few years, what's really struck me is that for so many Americans, especially those without direct family ties to Korea, the Korean War can feel like it's ancient history, right? We've had so many different military conflicts since then. And the division of Korea itself can feel really intractable. It's been that way forever. There's no point in questioning how it came to be that way, who made that decision, and what else might be possible if we approached it differently. But Women Cross DMZ's work is about questioning that common sense of how things work and how things have to be. And what I really loved about the film is that it shows that this work for peace is really not for the faint of heart, right? It's a lot harder to bridge these divides than it is to make them in the first place. But even though that work is messy and uncomfortable and full of pitfalls and contradictions, it's also really beautiful and necessary. The film also shows us how recent the war was, how it still looms really large in the lives of the people who lived through it, and how it never really ended. And it's, I think, a really powerful window into how complicated that history is and how impossible it is to assign our side righteous innocence and blame to another. So I believe that it's that kind of courageous storytelling and brilliant organizing that can help transform what we believe about Korea and thus what's possible in US foreign policy. So that's why I've been so honored to get to support both the organizing work at Women Cross DMZ and the film. And I would invite you to join me in supporting them as well. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Becca Yang, and I'm a 23-year-old daughter and granddaughter of Korean immigrants currently living in Providence, Rhode Island. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share why I'm excited about Crossings and why it's so important to be screened all over the US. As a second and third generation Korean in the US, I grew up largely unaware of my family's history, particularly my grandparents' experiences as refugees who were forced to leave their homes in present-day North Korea during the Korean War. It wasn't until college that I came to better understand this history and learned that the Korean War continues today. I also learned about the brutal impacts of war and militarized violence on so many other communities, including Indigenous peoples, undocumented families, and all the other places where the US has military bases. After learning about these histories, I've really struggled with intense feelings of despair, wondering if there was another possible future than more militarism and climate catastrophe. And I think a lot of young people can also relate to this feeling of existential despair. But watching Crossings made me feel really hopeful because it shows not only that peace is possible, but that there's a powerful movement led by women fighting for it. This film captures the work by Women Cross DMZ and the US-based grassroots Korea peace movement, building relationships among everyday people, hearing each other's stories, and engaging in bold collective action, which are all crucial to building a world without war. I'm so excited to bring Crossings to my community because I want others to know about the ongoing legacy of the Korean War and to feel inspired and motivated to create meaningful collective change. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Becca, Hani, and to Mimi. And I'm so excited to let you know that we are just $1,300, $1,300 away from our goal of $100,000. That $100,000 will help us to show Crossings at least 100 times. That's what we're hoping. But the money that we need is, I mean, we're just a little more than $1,000 away. So if any of you out there can find it within yourselves to give again or to give for the first time, remember, most of our donors have only been giving $25, $50, $100, whatever they can, and every single dollar counts. So please make that happen. We had budgeted about an hour for this event, and we are just 13 minutes away from finishing this event. Let's see if we can hit that last $1,300. Thank you to all of you who have given so far. I've been keeping track of as many names as I can. A big shout out and thank you to Lucinda N. Garcia, Ann Delaney, Kayleen Suh, Nicole Lee, Paul Liam, Brian Lee, Carlos Garcia, Helen Song. If there's anybody I missed, I'm so sorry, but it's hard to do all of this while also watching the chat line as we have many people part of this show. Thank you to all of you who have given already. Let's try to reach that goal. We just have a few minutes to do it. But I'm really excited now to try and help you, help us get over the edge and reach that goal by introducing you to the woman who made this all happen. She had a vision, she had some friends, she got to talking with them, and she made Women Cross DMZ happen. I'm talking about Christine Ahn, of course. She is the executive director of WCDMZ, and she's the international coordinator of the Korea Peace Now campaign. She's also the recipient of the 2020 US Peace Prize for her bold activism and leadership in peace building. So everyone, please welcome Christine Ahn.
Thank you so much, Vivian, and all of you. And this is my daughter, Jeju. She insisted on joining since she's been a part of this movement. No. I'm so moved by everyone's generosity, and it truly shows that this is such a powerful grassroots movement and a movement of individuals like all of you that are making this possible. So here we are. Thank you so much for joining us to celebrate the 7th anniversary of our DMZ crossing and the work that our movements have done since, which is documented, as you saw, in Deanne's powerful film, Crossings. I recently returned from New York, where we convened 23 leaders working on Korea peace, including Korean Americans from divided families, a son of a US soldier still missing from the Korean War, non-proliferation experts, a pastor, and humanitarian aid workers that have long supported North Korean farmers and doctors. Among them was Dr. Ki Park. He's a neurosurgeon from Harvard, and he's performed surgery alongside North Korean doctors. Dr. Park reflected at the meeting, quote, "I have to thank the women because it's their hard and unrelenting work that a peace agreement with North Korea is now part of now a part of the conversation," end quote. Well, Dr. Park is right. We know that when women are involved in peace-building processes, not only does it improve the chance that a peace agreement will be signed, but that it will last. It's been truly inspiring to see our movement grow in ways we could have never imagined. A decade ago, on the 60th anniversary of the Korean War, we could only get 2 members of Congress to support peace with North Korea. Today, there are nearly 40 co-sponsors of HR 3446, the Peace on the Korean Peninsula Act, which calls for a peace agreement to formally end the Korean War. And this bill was introduced by none other than Brad Sherman, who is a national security Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Well, we couldn't have gotten here without all the activists in our movement, and that includes all of you that are on this call tonight, and especially our beloved Hyun Lee, who recently passed away after a long battle with cancer. We miss Hyun dearly and know that her spirit will be with us until the finish line when we end the Korean War. Thanks to Crossings, we now have a powerful tool to educate the public about the costs of the unresolved war and the power of collective action. We've now screened it to 300 people in Honolulu, Seattle, New York, and LA. And the response is overwhelmingly, how do I get involved? If we can bring Crossings to more audiences, we can change more hearts and minds. That's why we'll screen Crossings in key districts across the country to strengthen our existing Korea Peace champions and build new ones. From June 13th through the 17th, hundreds of advocates from across the country will lobby their members of Congress to urge them to support Korea Peace. We'd love for you to join, so please register now and be part of our national movement to end America's oldest war. We have exciting plans to expand our movement, build new partnerships, and continue to educate people about the need to end this unresolved war. For example, we're in the process of creating student chapters of the Korea Peace Now Grassroots Network to build the bench of the next generation of Korea Peace leaders. We're going to produce several reports, one with our partners in South Korea about the costs of this unresolved war on women's lives, which we plan to release next year on the 70th anniversary of the ceasefire. We're also building a network of women peace builders across the Pacific and Asia who are impacted by the US-China Great Power conflict and increasing militarization. We're organizing virtual roundtables, and we'll meet in Korea in 2023 to call for replacing the armistice with a peace agreement. These new relationships are key to strengthening and broadening our movement and showing how the Korean War continues to impact us all. While I'm aware of the challenging road ahead, especially with a new conservative president in South Korea, whose election reflects the growing backlash against women's rights, I feel hopeful that Crossings will help open more doors so that we can continue to build the political will to end this oldest forever war and imagine an alternative future. After all, our peace work isn't just about the signing of a peace agreement, but it's about our ultimate vision, a feminist future of true human security for all people, a world free of weapons, war, and violence, a world where families can be together, where people can live in peace with healthcare, housing, education, and a clean environment. I hope you'll join us so that we can realize this positive vision together. We can do it. We must. And so now I'm so honored to introduce someone I simply could not do this work without. Our beloved Ayoung Chae, who chairs Women Cross DMZ's board. Ayoung is also the chair emerita of the Korean American Family Service Center in New York. She was born in what is now North Korea, and she has fully dedicated her life to working for peace on the Korean Peninsula. And for those of you that know me, there's not ever a moment that I can't cry. So thank you so much for joining us and giving so wholeheartedly to our movement.
Thank you, Christine. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ayoung Chae. 7 years ago, meeting up with 30 women, many of whom I didn't know at all, the women from around the world, to come together to cross the world's oldest, most militarized border together was like a dream come true. The crossing brought me back to my roots and opened my eyes to the collective wisdom and power of women and our relentless search for peace. When we arrived in Pyongyang that day, the view of the mountains in the distance touched my heart. It was intimately familiar to me, and I felt the sense of coming home at last, of returning, as Don Mi says. I was born some
80 years ago in a small coastal town in the northeast corner of the Korean Peninsula, when there was no North or South, but just one Korea. Our family left during the Japanese occupation when I was 3 years old. I grew up in China, Taiwan, and Japan, all hotspots today. When I was 20, I came to the US for college, and the rest is history. All the while, I longed to know what my real homeland was like and what it really meant to be Korean. In 2015, when I had the opportunity to cross the DMZ and help launch a movement to end the unended Korean War, my personal dream of seeing peace on the Korean Peninsula seemed possible. Women Cross DMZ continues to be a source of great inspiration to me and hope to strengthen my conviction that I will not rest until the DMZ is dismantled or I run out of breath. Yes, I'm in this for life, led by our brilliant leader, Christine Ahn, whom you heard from, our extraordinary filmmaker, Deanne Borche-Lim, also whom you've heard from, and our amazing staff and all our wonderful grassroots activists and allies across the US. We're especially grateful for our Korea, more than 50 of them, Korea Peace Champions in Congress, more at the UN and more overseas, and by all the champions for peace who, like you, generously fund and support us. But we have a lot of work to do, so please become a Korea Peace Champion today and walk with us. In the words of a beautiful sister from afar, we are strong, we're invincible, we are women. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Ayan. I can't think of a better way to end than to let you know we've reached our goal and then some. We have hit $100,000, $330,000 to be exact. So we went past what we were aiming for, thanks to all of you. Thank you a million times for helping this to come into being, to make this happen. We really did not know what to expect tonight. Your generosity is really, it leaves a lot of us speechless. The chat line is just going crazy right now with everybody reacting to this amazing result. Thank you, thank you, thank you again. But we're not going to leave it right there just yet. To take us out, I'd like to bring back Do-hee Lee and the Mu Ritual Performers. They're going to share their art with us one more time. And I guess this doubles again as a thank you for all of you for joining us and for making this happen. I hope to have more of an update, and maybe we'll have another event to keep you up to date on what's happening with the Impact campaign. And obviously, a lot of you out there felt that 100 screenings around the world just wasn't enough. Thank you to this amazing team and to all of you, our supporters. Enjoy the conclusion.
Right on time. I think we were like 1 minute behind schedule.
Oh my God, Anne, you saved our asses with that donation.
Oh, I think it would have happened because everyone was so good. It was really moving. It was really, really moving, everything. It was a really good show.
It was.
Thank you. Oh my God, thank you, everybody. Anne, thank you. Aeon,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
Vivian,
and you did it.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
It was so good.
Okay, well, I
What a
hope
key
so.
moment.
I'm talking and
Wait,
just
where is
realized I was on
Vivian?
mute the whole time. It's like,
Did Vivian go home?
I don't know. Young, I could listen to you talk the whole time. You're so soothing when you speak. I loved listening to you. I felt like I was in a Disney movie. Like I really did. It's like the way you talk is so soothing. It's amazing.
Is that you? Is that Gina talking?
It is me. It is me. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, you did. What an awesome and that was incredible. That that and then Vivian's pledge and Christine. I deleted the 250 or the 250.
Oh no, the 500. The 500.
Delete the 500. Okay, I'll fix that.
Yeah.
But no, it was an awesome night, ladies. You did an incredible job. The stories were incredible. So congratulations.
Can I just say something? First of all, I couldn't find the darn button to do it. So Christine says something to me about now you're going to do it or something. And I couldn't find it. Whatever there was supposedly something on the, I think a speaker cannot donate.
Good night, Anne. Thank you so much. Anne saying she's leaving. Thank you for everything. No, you can donate. We were just running on the Paybe side, but I'm sure Deanne knows where to find you.
Well, no, I couldn't. So I texted my son. So I texted my son and I said, "Can you do it in your name?" And he says, "No, I can't. It'll come up in your name." I said, "Can you do it in my name?" And he said, "No, I can't. It'll come up in my name again." That's not bad. Do it again. And then, of course, you couldn't resolve this for me, but it is so disconcerting. I do not have a mirror image of me.
You look great.
No, it's a sideways. So when I go like this, I'm going that way. When I go like